I work in the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or the MHRA, which is the UK regulator of medical products. And my session was about synthetic data. So at the moment, synthetic data in itself is not being used in clinical trials, but there is promise for that. So my session was more about, this is a promising area. Let's see if there are some interesting use cases where it may be appropriate to use these data to enhance clinical trials. Now, one of the areas that we've looked at is if you have a small clinical trial sample. Now, ideally, you will have planned for this before you started your clinical study. But sometimes you've done your clinical study, and despite your best efforts, your sample size is too small. And if in that situation, you need a rescue component where it's absolutely not feasible to go and collect more data, synthetic data could be an option. So in this case, you would take the existing clinical trial data that you have, and you could boost the data, especially if there were certain subgroups that were underrepresented in the data, and then rerun your analysis. So what it gives you is a better sense of uncertainty analysis. So what I'm talking about is not about replacing clinical trials, but how you can strengthen some of the evidence, especially if you have run into these logistics issues. So like all novel approaches or methodologies, the first thing we'll want to know is, why do you want to use this novel approach? Is there an existing good enough approach which has plenty of evidence behind it that you could be using instead? What is the added value of this technology? Or what are the particular constraints or barriers you're facing that justifies the use of this? Now, if you're using synthetic data, as I explained in my session, there are different approaches to generating synthetic data. You can have a purely data-driven approach, or you can have something which is being discussed more in the context of in silico or virtual trials called mechanistic models. So in that context, we'll want to know, how have you generated synthetic data? What is the source data you're using to populate your synthetic data generator model? And is the synthetic data that is coming out of this, is it representative or reflective of your target or intended population, intended use population? So those are sort of the questions we'll ask. And as someone else said, with all these methodologies, it's first looking at the data quality, your source data, you looking at your context of use, and then applying these. And as long as you tick the box on all of these, you know that you will have a case for using them.